Was it illegal for the United States of America to launch the airstrikes in Nigeria? Ask yourself, Nigeria is a sovereign nation, and if Nigeria is sovereign, quote unquote, on what basis should the United States of America or Israel or any other country launch the airstrikes or missiles in Nigeria? What is the basis for that? Was there any violations of international law or relations? We will be discussing this through the lens of international law and relations. Through the lenses of independence, Nigeria acquired sovereignty, and sovereignty loosely basically means the right and the power a country or a nation has to govern itself and determine its internal affairs without needless interruptions or interference from other states. So a state is sovereign when it can do anything it wants to do within its internal borders. And so Nigeria can enact laws that govern us. NSAS, something that happened in October 2020. It happened within our borders. There was no call from the international world to come in and do anything. A lot of things can happen within our borders, and the Nigerian military and Nigerian police can contain it. Our lawmakers can make laws. Our executive can do what they should do, as well as our judiciary. So at what point can the US come in? So let us look at Article 2, Sub 3 and 4 of the UN Charter. Now, if we read that together, the intent of this is that countries do not use threat or force. Use of force is completely prohibited, right? In international relations, conflict resolutions, and what have you. Do not use threat. Do not use threat. Do not use force to get to resolutions. Look for peaceful means to solve the problem. Okay, so that means force firing anything is not allowed. Okay, so if peaceful resolutions are what we need, what is happening in Russia and Ukraine? What is happening in Israel and Palestine/Gaza? What is happening in Iran as well? And now what is now happening between Nigeria and US? Isn't it force that is in use? Also remember that Nigeria is a signatory to the UN Charter. Nigeria, US, Israel, most countries of the world are signatories to the UN Charter, and so the content of the UN Charter would bind them. But that's not even why we are here. We are here to discuss on what basis did the US do what it did on 25th December 2025 in Nigeria. Now, on that same UN Charter of 1945, if you go down, you are going to see Article 51 again. It says, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense. Take note of those words. I will come back to that. Individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations, until the Security Council has taken the measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. The gamut of Article 51 is this. Members of the United Nations can use any reasonable measure to defend themselves for and in the interest of individual and collective security or self-defense. Now, individual self-defense here means Nigeria as a nation defending itself. So take for instance, if another country was attacking Nigeria, Nigeria is allowed to use force to defend itself. Now, we're going to talk about preemptive self-defense, but let us understand self-defense basically. Now, for collective self-defense, it now goes beyond one nation. So Ghana, Nigeria, Niger can team up collectively to protect their borders against any other country or any other person or non-state actor. Now, this is where there is an active threat. The threat is imminent. The threat is there. But what if nothing has happened? Can I still defend myself, or do I wait? Should a state wait until something has happened? And so we see that what happened in Iran and US is basically preemptive self-defense. It is preempted by Netanyahu that Iran had developed the nuclear port or depot, or however they termed it, and if they were given less than 1 month, they will detonate and they will start using the nuclear weapons. And what did US do? US struck, even though Iran hadn't attacked any state at all. US did not wait US did not wait for Iran to attack before it could attack. So that is preemptive self-defense. It is allowed in international affairs. Also, what Russia is doing with Ukraine, or what Ukraine and Russia are doing, is based on preemptive self-defense. That is, Russia thinks that if Ukraine joins NATO, not Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO is now going to have their military base. NATO will now have their military base just behind Russia borders. And Russia is saying that we're not comfortable with that. However, Ukraine hadn't joined NATO, but they have made plans to join. And NATO hadn't built their military base in Ukraine yet. But Russia preempts that these things will happen. And in order to prevent it from happening, they started to attack Ukraine. US sent airstrikes to Nigeria on 25th December 2025. Was there an imminent attack? Is it on preemptive attack? Is it on preemptive self-defense? And on what authority did they do that? Already, by the conjunction of Article 51 of the UN Charter, you can decipher that even though Article 2, sub 3 and 4 said no use of force, Article 51 have now come in to say you can use force to defend yourself individually or collectively in the interest of international peace and security. Take note of that word. International peace and security is key. And so it is not just my own peace and security, the world's peace and security. It is on this ground that US had its base in Afghanistan sometime and other countries. You don't have to wait, because if Nigeria degenerates, there will be an outflow of the war, and that outflow is definitely going to affect the international community. And so the US is saying, there is something happening in Nigeria. They conducted their investigations and they said, you know what? These things are happening. It is real. It is palpable. And we're going to come in the interest of international peace and security to stall this from spreading into other countries and beyond the Nigerian borders. But this is not the only basis upon which US sent their strikes to Nigeria. There's another basis, and that is collaborative international relations. Now, the Nigerian Foreign Minister, Yusuf Tagar, also said that US did not strike or send airstrikes to northern Nigeria independently, that there was a collaboration between Nigeria and US, again, in the interest of international security and peace. And so US on its own could have, literally, if it was getting out of hand, US on its own could have stalled this on its own. However, there was a collaboration between Nigeria and the US and Nigeria in the interest of protecting its own internal integrity as well, granted the US the permission to do what they did. And so it is not that US just woke up one morning and that US can just do whatever it's doing. Recall that US conducted investigation over and over again, which were televised. We all saw it in the news. Persons, even Nigerian Nigerian citizens were called on to testify. There were video evidence, graphic as they are, pictorial evidence as well. And so the ground upon which US sent airstrikes in Nigeria are based on Article 51 in the interest of collective international peace and security, and also on the collaboration between Nigeria and the US. The airstrikes that were sent from US to Nigeria, or by US to Nigeria, specifically Sokoto State, is legal. It's legal and it is not against any known international law and regulations.